Hi, and welcome to the Bible Standard, a detailed expositional Bible deep dive study on the profound significance of the 70th Jubilee. This presentation delves into biblical chronology, the counting of Sabbath years, and the determination of holy seasons. Crispian Martin Walker offers a thought-provoking analysis of key timelines, including an examination of the year 1406 BC, to build a wonderful understanding of prophecy and God's appointed times. A revealing study for those seeking a deeper knowledge of scriptural timelines. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and drop us a comment to have your say. We love to hear from you.
Times and Seasons, W.H. Carter, Study 4, Update. There is very strong evidence that we are living in the 70th Jubilee year from the time that the children of Israel crossed into the Promised Land. God commanded Israel to count in Jubilee periods from this time onwards. I believe the end of the larger 77s prophecy is almost upon us, finishing very soon. For more information on the subject, please refer to my first 3 studies on Christadelphian video. This 4th study is an update on our first 3 studies based on the work of W.H. Carter in his book Times and Seasons. We will be briefly going over the salient arguments in the first 3 studies. We will give a lot of new information, including showing that the calendar is reliable using astronomical evidence, and giving new insight regarding the Jubilee year. Jesus said, "Forgive 70 times 7. This is a direct quotation from the 77s prophecy. The Authorized Version says 70 weeks prophecy, which you are most probably more familiar with, but the Hebrew says 77. So the 77s are determined for your people and for your holy city. Strong's H7620. It literally means sevened. You can have 7 as a number, as it's translated in Ezekiel 45, verse 21, or a week. The 70 weeks, literally sevened, is not unique or specific to an exact length of time, and so both a week of ordinary years, 7 years, and a week of Sabbath years, 49 years, can both naturally be used in this prophecy without forcing the meaning. W.H. Carter believed both time periods were used in the prophecy. So if we go to Leviticus 25, verse 8, we read, 7 Sabbaths of years shall be to you 49 years. So we can see that it's 7 Sabbaths of years. So when we go back to Daniel 9, verse 24, we can put this into the verse. 70 times 7 Sabbaths of years are determined for your people and for your holy city. The 7 Sabbaths of years, 49-year Jubilee cycle of Leviticus 25 is the first time period to consider when entering the time period into the prophecy of Daniel, which equals 3,430 years. The Lamb's Bible also confirms this. It says 70 times 7 weeks are determined upon your people and upon your holy city. So 49 years equals a Jubilee cycle, showing 7 Sabbaths of years here. The 7 green squares are Sabbatical years, or Shemitah, or release years. The 50th Jubilee year, the Jubilee, is proclaimed in the 49th year on the Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement is on Tishri 10. The year of Jubilee is proclaimed on Tishri 10. If you see there in Daniel 9, verse 25, it says, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Isaac Newton thought it was strange that the prophecy just didn't say 69 weeks, but 7 weeks and 62, and he believed that was pointing towards a Jubilee cycle. The key to the study is to find the start of the Sabbath years and Jubilee cycles. When you come into the land which I give you, you shall count 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself. The end of counting finishes after the 70th Jubilee. The Jubilee calendar, I believe, is God's calendar for your people and for your holy city. It starts on the day Israel entered the promised land, and God wanted Israel to keep counting in Jubilee periods. The calendar finishes on the completion of the 70th Jubilee, I believe. Finding 2 known points to validate the Jubilee calendar, Roger Young identifies the 17th Jubilee, which anchors the Bible to 2 events in history. We are going to confirm this date using astronomy, and we're going to then find the 0 Jubilee. Roger Young then finds the 0 Jubilee an entrance to the land by going back 17 Jubilee cycles. He then verifies the 0 Jubilee against 1 Kings 6 verse 1, related to the Exodus 40 years earlier. The hidden Jubilee in the Bible. When we say it's hidden, it's because the original is in Hebrew, which we miss out the translation. Ezekiel 40 verse 1. And we're going to just hone in on this little bit here. In the 25th year of our captivity, in the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month. The phrase beginning of the year is Rosh Hashanah, and it's only mentioned once in the Bible. The phrase at the beginning of the year is a very poor translation, which gives the idea that the chapter is talking about the month Nisan at the start of the year. Rosh is the Hebrew word for head. Har is the definite article. The and Shana means year. Thus, Rosh Hashanah means head of the year, referring to the Jewish day of New Year. Wikipedia. Yet this head of the year is not on the 1st of Tishri, but on the 10th day of a month. And that day is seen in Leviticus 25, verse 9 to 10. Then you shall cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the day of atonement, you shall make the trumpet to sound throughout all your land, and you shall consecrate the 50th year. The Hebraic Roots Bible comment section says this: the beginning of the year in the Hebrew is Rosh Hashanah, means head of the year. The only time Rosh Hashanah is on the 10th of the month is in a Jubilee year. We believe Ezekiel 40 verse 1 is on the Day of Atonement. We read about the self-same day, Strong's H6105. And you can see in yellow there, in the self-same day. We also read of this phrase for emphasis on feast days, for instance. And when we go to Leviticus 23, we can see this phrase again, on that same day, on that same day, on that same day, 3 times in Leviticus 23. So we can see that the Day of Atonement is connected with the Jubilee. We've looked at this in study 1, so I'll just go over it quickly. But it basically says, in the 25th year of our captivity, in the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year, after that the city was smitten, in the selfsame day the hand of the Lord was upon me and brought me thither. And we can see there when the captivity started in 598, and when the city was smitten in 588. So this is in the 25th year of the captivity and the 14th year after the city was smitten. So we'll look at the next slide for details from Roger C. Young. And he tells us that the start of the captivity was 598 BC and the city was smitten in 588. And when you add the 25 years of the captivity and the 14 years after the city was smitten, we come to Tishri of 574 BC. So the 17th Jubilee, we believe, was in 574 BC on the Day of Atonement. Ezekiel's Jubilee is called the 17th Jubilee in the Talmud and the Seder Olam. Brother Thomas and Brother Sully both agree that Ezekiel 40 verse 1 was a Jubilee year. How do we know that the calendar is right? That it is not a few years out, over thousands of years? We will now check the date of the chronologist and the calendar using Bible and science. I'd like to acknowledge the excellent work of Nick van der Laan in using much of his work regarding astronomy to verify the date of the Jubilee in history. Using recorded sightings in history, the unique fingerprints in the stars seen in the positions of the planets, moon and stars can tell us exactly which year those events happened in. It's an astronomical fingerprint. There's a tablet in the Berlin Museum, VAT 4956. It records the observable astronomical signs of Nebuchadnezzar's 37th year of reign as king. So it actually says 37th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign on this tablet. So we can find out when this was in history using astronomy. And the fingerprint is definite that it's for the year 568 BC. So by knowing this date, then we can go to Ezekiel 40 verse 1 when we talk about the start of the captivity, because Nebuchadnezzar also speaks about that in one of his years of reign. There's a second tablet which tells us about the first captivity of Judah and is dated to the 7th year of Nebuchadnezzar. So that's going to be easy to find, isn't it? The Chronicle does not refer to Jerusalem directly, but mentions the city of Yehuda, interpreted to be the city of Judah. The Chronicle states in the 7th year of Nebuchadnezzar, and we see that Jehoiachin or Jeconiah was taken prisoner, and in that first year he installed in place King Zedekiah. So notice in the first year of the captivity, King Zedekiah is installed as king. Therefore, years of captivity equal the years of the reign of Zedekiah. So we can see that year 568 BC from the tablet is the 37th year of Nebuchadnezzar. So the first year is simple. We go back 37 years and we find out it's in the year 604 BC. Now this is interesting for our studies, but also for other studies. When we're looking at chronology in the Bible, we can be absolutely assured these dates are correct. The Babylonian calendar is spring to spring. So what we're going to do now is look from the 7th year of Nebuchadnezzar, which is 598 BC. So the first captivity we read about is in the 7th year of Nebuchadnezzar. The second is in the 18th year. And the third is in the 23rd year. We just used Jeremiah 52 to find these out. And then the temple was burnt in the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar. So the years of captivity are in purple here. Jeremiah 52 is when the city was smitten. So the city was besieged until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. By the 4th month, on the 9th day of the month, the famine had become so severe in the city that there was no food for the people of the land. Then the city wall was broken through, and all the men of war fled and went out of the city at night by the way of the gate between the two walls, which was by the king's garden. Ezekiel 33 also sheds light on this. And it says, and it came to pass in the 12th year of our captivity, in the 10th month, in the 5th day of the month, that one that had escaped out of Jerusalem came unto me, saying, the city is smitten. Now, you notice the city is smitten in the 11th year in chapter 52. But of course, in chapter Ezekiel 33, it would have taken time for the person who fled and escaped from Jerusalem to Babylon to get there. And that's why it speaks about the 12th year in a minute. The city is smitten, so that's when the wall's broken through. So in Jeremiah 52, we read in the 11th year of King Zedekiah by the 4th month. And then we read in Ezekiel 33 in the 12th year of our captivity in the 10th month. It takes 6 months to get to Jerusalem by foot. Remember, this is the civil year. On the first day of the 7th month, the year changes. Zedekiah used the biblical calendar. So there's the second and third captivity and city burnt. We'll just remove those for a clear screen. So the first captivity was in Nebuchadnezzar's 7th year. Ezekiel 40 verse 1 says, in the 25th year of our captivity. So the 25th year of the captivity is 574 BC. In the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year, after the city was smitten. Well, the city was smitten in the 11th year of King Zedekiah. Then the city wall was broken through. Remember, the 11th year of the captivity is also the 11th year of the reign of Zedekiah. So we see that the 17th Jubilee in two time periods there both come to 574 BC. So we can be assured that Ezekiel 40 verse 1, looking at the chronologists and looking at astronomy, both come to 574 BC, which is the 17th Jubilee. If we go back 17 Jubilees, we come to 1407. The Zero Jubilee. Judah used the civil calendar, starting from Tishri to Elul. And we see that counting started in BC 1407, but they entered the land in the middle of the civil year in BC 1406. And as you can see, our Gregorian years, 1407 and 1406 are overlapped with the civil calendar there. When they first came into the land, it talks about 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark, but the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. This first dedication to God when they first came into the land had Jubilee themes throughout. 7 times 7 is the 49-year Jubilee. And these were Yobel trumpets. This start of the Jubilees was a foretaste of when Jesus returns and every war and human rule shall fall. Roger Young now takes us to 1 Kings 6 verse 1 to show another totally independent source of information that we can use to confirm when they entered the land. That's 1 Kings 6 verse 1, and it came to pass in the 480th year that the children of Israel will come out of the land of Egypt in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel. The 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, year 968 BC, Tishri. See Edwin Teeler, The Mysterious Numbers of the Hebrew Kings. Also, chronologists agree with this date. So Roger C. Young tells us that it's the going out, and I'll let you read that little bit there, but basically it's not, you don't use 480 in the calculation, but 479 years, because the year hadn't yet completed. We confirm the date of the Exodus by going back 479 years from 968 BC. Comparing the calculations of Ezekiel 40 verse 1 and 1 Kings 6 verse 1 to confirm the date of the entry into the land from two independent sources. So we see the 17th Jubilee as 574 BC to 573. We go back 17 Jubilees and we come to 1407, 1406. They were in the wilderness 40 years. And that means the Exodus was 1447 to 1446 BC. Now, when we take Solomon's fourth year, the chronologists tell us it's 968 to 967. We go back 479 years, and we come to 1447, 1446 BC. So we can see that two totally independent ways of working out the Jubilee periods both equal each other. So we can be absolutely confident and assured that these time periods are real and we can use them. There's the maths, which I won't go into. The Exodus was in the spring of 1446 BC, and 40 years later, they entered the land in the spring of 1406 BC. I want to make a correction to my studies. I suggested in my earlier studies that the Jubilee started in Nisan, following the pattern of the sabbatical cycles. At the time, I was in two minds on this subject, as I believed at the time there was evidence for both ways. To give a balanced view, I said that many believe the Jubilee year starts in Tishri in the autumn. The Jubilee is proclaimed on the 10th of the 7th month, which I thought indicated that it was proclaiming halfway through a year beginning in Nisan, thinking that if the Jubilee year followed the civil calendar, then this day would have been called the 10th day of the first month. And I believe the year of Jubilee starts in Tishri and not Nisan, as I previously thought. Since then, I have found out that the month number from a year starting in Nisan is still kept in the civil year beginning in Tishri. The civil year order of months is 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In the next few slides, we hope to reinforce this reasoning. Example of month number from a year starting in Nisan being still kept in the civil year beginning in Tishri. Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, used the civil calendar starting in Tishri, as is generally agreed amongst chronologists. In fact, in Israel today, they still start the new year in Tishri, the civil year, and they still use the religious year from Nisan. Jeremiah 36 says, "Now the king was sitting in the winter house in the 9th month with a fire burning on the hearth before him." The counting of the year clearly starts in Nisan in the spring, as it says the king was in the winter house and he had the fire beside him to keep him warm. If counting had started in the autumn, then the king would not have been in his winter house with the fire burning in the summer. So what we learn is that even in a civil year, they counted from Nisan and the month number was kept. In this case, it was the 9th month. I thought it would be the 3rd month, but I believe I was incorrect. So if we go from the 17th Jubilee forward 53 Jubilees and add 1 year because there's no BC year, we come to 2024, the Day of Atonement, 10th of Tishri, 2024. The Jubilee year is 2024 to 25, I believe. So the Jubilee year is 10th of Tishri, 2024 to the 9th of Tishri, 2025. I believe the end of the 70th Jubilee year time period will end this autumn on the 9th of Tishri, if I am correct in my deliberations. However, a year before the end of the time period, a special day came and went, the Day of Atonement, which is at the start of a Jubilee year. Under the law, the Jubilee would be proclaimed on the Day of Atonement in the 49th year. I wondered if the Jubilee year might be proclaimed last year, and if so, who by? Could it be Jesus himself? However, a correspondent reminded me that Jesus proclaimed the Jubilee in his ministry. Reading from Luke 4, we read of Jesus, and it says, in verse 19, he came to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. So proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord is to proclaim the Jubilee. This quotation comes from Isaiah 61, which has Jubilee themes throughout. Jesus, in essence, proclaimed the Jubilee about 2,000 years ago. When we look at sabbatical years and the Jubilee years, one of the main debates is when do the sabbatical years start and when does the Jubilee year start? Do they follow the religious calendar or do they follow the civil calendar? Or is it a combination of both? Well, remember we read about the head of the year? Well, on our calendar, January to December, we start the year in January, but we also count it from there. The Israelites and Babylon and other countries' years started and were counted from Nisan in the spring. However, in Judah, months were started in Nisan and years were counted in Tishri. We should consider the calendar like this. Nisan to Tishri and then Tishri to Adar, coming back on itself. So this is the earth going round the sun, and here is the head of the year. The biblical calendar is intrinsically bound to the orbital circuit of the earth around the sun. An example from the mysterious numbers of the Hebrew kings shows that Judah kept the ecclesiastical year starting from Nisan, but counted years in the 7th month from Tishri using the civil calendar. So at the time of Solomon, we read the following. 7 years for building of the temple can be secured only when regnal years are computed from Tishri to Tishri, but with a Nisan to Nisan year used for the reckoning of ordinary events and the ecclesiastical year. The Mysterious Numbers of the Hebrew Kings by Edwin R. Teeler. Many believe that sabbatical years start in Tishri in the autumn because of verses like the following. And thou shalt observe the feast of weeks of the first fruits of wheat harvest and the feast of ingathering at the year's end. So this is in the autumn winter. And the word end there is H622. In Strong's Concordance. So we'd expect a civil year from Tishri to Elul. Looking at this example above, we can see why many believe the sabbatical cycles start in Tishri. If the end of the year is in the autumn, therefore that implies that the start of the new year must also be in the autumn. However, we will see the Hebrew word end here is also translated differently in other translations. So here we have the head of the year. The Complete Jewish Bible says turn of the year. The Young's Literal Translation says at the revolution of the year. So you can see how the earth goes round the sun and it's revolving. The Holman Christian Standard Bible says at the turn of the agricultural year. And the Septuagint Bible says in the middle of the year. So we can see plainly the head of the year is the turn of the year, the middle of the year. So the earth orbits the sun like that. So there's two distinctive halves to the year. The end of the circuit with half a year to complete. So there's Nisan, there's Tishri. And we read this word end is now translated circuit. His going forth is from the end of the heaven, and his circuit and to the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. The biblical calendar starts on the sighting of the new moon after the vernal equinox in the spring. So that's Nisan and Tishri. This wasn't always the case. The strong tradition of the Jews is that the first month of the year was in Tishri, in the 7th month. It was when the earth was made and man upon it. It is likely because of the fall of man that the start of the year was put back to Nisan or Abib in Exodus 12:2, and that time was given for mankind to be redeemed and reconciled to God and prepare for that great day of atonement at the head of the year. Many believe the 7th month and its festivals all point to when the Lord Jesus Christ will return, when this mortal will put on immortality. It seems that the Jubilee is linked with the Day of Atonement, when all debts of sins are forgiven. So the Babylonian names of months, we have Nisan, which means month of beginning, which we'd expect. But it's interesting to note that Tishri also is the month of beginning, i.e. the start of the second half of the year. So clearly, even in this naming, there's two halves of the year for Judah, the religious year and the civil year. So we have the religious year in Nisan, the civil year in Tishri. Where is the sabbatical year and where is the year of Jubilee? Most think that both of them start in Tishri. A smaller minority think they both start in Nisan, and a smaller amount again think one of each. Well, we hope to show that the sabbatical year starts in Nisan and the year of Jubilee starts in Tishri. So we're going to look at when these sabbatical cycles start, the spring or the autumn. As you can see from here, the cycle begins with the early rains in the autumn, ploughing and sowing. So the biblical calendar is as follows. It starts with Nisan, finishes with Adar. Nisan is in the spring, March, April, the time of reaping. Tishri is in the autumn, September to October, the time of sowing. So we're going to first of all have a look at a year starting in Nisan and then a year starting in Tishri to see when the sabbatical year should start, using Leviticus 25 to help us. And it says, and you shall sow in the 8th year, which is here, and reap in the 9th year, which is there. The year beginning in Nisan is in sequence with the text. Now we're going to do the same for a year beginning in Tishri. And you shall sow in the 8th year. Yeah, that's fine. But when we come to the 9th year, you can see what's happened, can't you? Reaping should take place in the 8th year, and it's out of sequence with the stipulated 9th year. So we suggest that sabbatical cycles start in the spring and fit in with Leviticus 25. And you shall sow in the 8th year and reap in the 9th year. Again, we read, now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, this month, Nisan, because he goes on to talk about the Passover, it's not there in the text, shall be your beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. And also, as we've seen, Israel entered the land on the 10th of Nisan, 1406 BC in the spring. So that makes sense that this is the beginning in the spring of the sabbatical cycles. We want to look at the 6th year will bring forth produce enough for 3 years. Why is that? These verses only speak about a sabbatical year and not a jubilee year. Notice the scripture makes provision for every 7th sabbatical year. It does not make provision for an 8th year, a possible jubilee year, It does not say, what shall you eat in the 8th year? Why then are 3 years of produce if it is not speaking about an extra Jubilee year? Well, when we look at Leviticus 25 verses 20 to 22, we see that a year 8 and 9 can occupy any of the two left-hand columns as a continuation of the Sabbath year in the previous column. So we're going to have a look at the number of years of food needed to keep the Sabbath year for a year beginning in Tishri compared with a year beginning in Nisan, following the reaping and sowing cycles. As you can see, the Sabbatical year, the 7th year, you leave fallow. You also leave the last part of year 6 fallow because you can't reap it in the Sabbatical year 7. And because you haven't sown in the 7th Sabbatical year, you won't be able to reap it in the first part of year 8. So 3 years of food are needed until reaping can commence again. Whereas looking at the Tishri start of the year, following sowing, reaping, etc., we only need 2 years of food until you can reap again. A nice and spring start to the Sabbatical year fits in perfectly with it, will bring forth produce enough for 3 years. If a Tishrei autumn start to the Sabbatical year was correct, then the scripture would have said, bring forth produce enough for 2 years. When does the year of Jubilee start? Is it in the spring with the religious year or the autumn with the civil year? Well, first of all, we know that the Sabbatical year starts in year 7. And we're going to put the Jubilee year in year 8. Now, some people think that the Jubilee cycle is 49 years and then a separate 1 year and then the next 49 years. Some say the 50th year shares the first year of the next Jubilee cycle. But both of those, the position 8 there would be the Jubilee year. It would be 2 years next to each other. So let's have a look what happens when we apply Leviticus 25. You sow in the 8th year. Now there's a problem with that, because that 50th year shall be a Jubilee to you. In it you shall neither sow nor reap. So this precludes the 8th year being the Jubilee year, because you can't sow or reap in a Jubilee year. Brother Carter brings that out in Times and Seasons, page 34. We're going to have a look at it. There's the Jubilee year as the 10th of Nisan to the 9th of Nisan. So there's 2 places then that are left for us to look at, either starting from Nisan or Tishri. So the Sabbatical year starts in year 7. And the Jubilee year is from the 10th of Nisan to the 9th of Nisan, which I first thought, but I don't think that's right now. So, of course, you can sow in this year. There's not a problem. This suggestion fits Leviticus 25. So it's a Nisan to Nisan year. I had a letter from a correspondent, which I'm grateful for, which disagreed with me. And we're going to have a look at that now. I'll leave that up just for a second if you want to stop the video. This is basically what he's saying. He's saying that the Jubilee year is from 10th of Tishri to the 9th of Tishri. So the Sabbatical year is there, and he agreed with me on that, but he doesn't agree the Jubilee year should be there. He says it should be here, and I agree with him. And it says, and you shall sow in the 8th year. This suggestion fits Leviticus 25, as you can see. So it's a Tishrei to Tishrei Jubilee year, but it's a Nisan to Nisan sabbatical year. The Seder Olam says the same. If you pick it up from Ezekiel 40 verse 1 there, it says, and then says that the vision referred to the verse was at the beginning of a Jubilee. So that confirms it as well. We're almost certainly in the 70th Jubilee year. The day and year of vengeance we read about, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord and the day of vengeance of our God, Isaiah 61 verse 2 says. Isaiah 34 verse 8 says, for it is the day of the Lord's vengeance, the year of recompense for the cause of Zion. Isaiah 63 verse 4 says, for the day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed has come. In Isaiah, we read of a day and year of vengeance. Some suggest this will be in the Jubilee year, and others suggest it will be when Jesus returns. I favour the latter. So the calendar of God is the Jubilee calendar, I suggest, and I believe it's almost finished. And it's referring particularly to this. 77s are determined for your people and for your holy city. We need to keep our eyes on the Jews and the holy city of Jerusalem. Therefore, we should be keeping our eyes on God's people and Jerusalem in these last weeks of this time period and after. After this time period, we cannot be sure what will happen. We will wait and see. However, we suggest that there may be a different relationship between God and his people. Maybe they will be left on their own, left to their own devices. We know many hardships will come on the people, and eventually they will turn in faith to their God. And the word determined there, when you look in Gesenius, has the idea of cut, and we know about cutting a covenant. So it looks as though this is a time period and a covenant as well. W.H. Carter and Isaac Newton both believe that this time period was also connected with the return of Christ. If we are right in our studies and the time period finishes this autumn, we cannot be certain how soon his return would be at the time for the following reasons. You see, notice the Messiah is not mentioned in Daniel 24 above there. We believe that Jesus was revealed at his baptism at the 69th week, halfway through the 70-week prophecy. The Messiah was cut off. There was still 3.5 years to complete the 70th week. Jesus was not cut off or revealed exactly at the end of the 70-week prophecy. It was 3.5 years before the completion of the prophecy. So in like manner, we cannot be certain that he will come at the completion of the 70th Jubilee. He may tarry, as the parable says, but we should firstly be looking at the people of God and his holy city at this time. Conclusion of our studies. Sabbatical cycles start in Nisan, we believe, Abib. The 50th Jubilee year starts in Tishri. Jubilee cycles are 49 years in length. The children of Israel entered the promised land on the 10th of Nisan, 1406 BC. 1 Kings 6 verse 1 validates this date. Ezekiel 40 verse 1 is the 17th Jubilee according to the Talmud and the Seder Olam. The 70th Jubilee is 10th of Tishri to 2024, to the 9th of Tishrei 2025. The end of the 77th time period is 2nd of October 2025. Astronomy shows we can have confidence in the dates in history. The Jubilee cycles are real. We want to make a big point about that. They're real cycles and can be used in furtherance of Bible study and checking chronology in the Bible. I'll just give you 2 incidences from our studies. In study 2, we said that W.H. Carter and Isaac Newton both thought that the decree at the start of the 70-week prophecy would fall on a sabbatical year. We will magnify part of the 19th Jubilee cycle so we can see the sabbatical years. So all of those in red, 14, 462, etc., are all sabbatical years. Brother Carter suggests the decree of Artaxerxes Longimus was in 455 BC and offers proof in his chronological section. There's other brothers and sisters who have also come up with the same date, and some have used astronomy as well. This decree is divisible by 7, showing it fits into the larger Jubilee cycle perfectly. The chances of this are 1 in 7. It's of note, none of the other 3 dates for decrees that are considered fall on a sabbatical year. Hezekiah's possible Jubilee year. We can see what's going on here by following the sabbatical and Jubilee cycles. The Assyrian siege of Jerusalem, 701 BC. This is the 14th Jubilee cycle and the 3rd sabbatical year where these things happen. So we can see the reaping and sowing cycles there at the beginning of the year in Nisan spring. No sowing would take place in the 6th year as it could not be reaped in a sabbatical year. No reaping or sowing would take place in the 7th sabbatical year. No reaping would take place in the 8th year, as sowing had not taken place in the 7th sabbatical year. This shall be a sign to you. You shall eat this year, which was the 6th year, such as grows of itself. The rest of the produce the Assyrians had taken, and then they put rocks and things in the field. So they wouldn't have had any food unless God would have fed them. And the 2nd year, which is the sabbatical year, what springs from the same. Also in the 3rd year, sow and reap. Now it's interesting to realise, looking at that, you can see that the 7th year was sabbatical, so they wouldn't have sowed in it. So in the 8th year, they wouldn't have reaped. Yet the scripture clearly says they would reap. So this is showing again a miracle of God that we wouldn't see unless we knew when the sabbatical cycles were. That was in talk 3. So we're in the 70th Jubilee, I suggest, which started 10th of Tishri 2024 to the 9th of Tishri 2025. So let us watch the holy city and its people, and be about our Master's business until he come.
Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Drop a comment in the comment section and let us know what you thought. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Please share it and spread the word. Thanks for watching, and remember to come back soon.